Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Safe House, brought to you by the SafeHouse Initiative. I'm Jeff Edwards, co-chair of the SafeHouse Initiative, and your host for today's podcast. We have a very exciting program for you today. This episode, I'm joined by Curtis Preston, known in the industry as Mr. Backup and host of the Backup Wrap-Up podcast. Curtis, can you tell us how you got your name, Mr. Backup?
I don't actually know how the actual name. What's funny is the nickname I got before Mr. Backup was way less flattering. It's sort of the same time frame, and that was there was a moment like I started my career in backup, and then I went into consulting to get out of backup to become a quote real sysadmin, right? Like a lot of backup people, they want to become grow up and be a real boy, right? Yep. And I got put into the headquarters of a company that I don't think is around anymore, Amoco, right? American Oil Company.
Yeah.
And and I put in a lot of backups, and I was actually administering the systems, and I was doing weird things like applying patches and rebooting them for their first time in like months or years, and because they had been really ignored up to that point. Mm-hmm. And what was happening was every time I would do that, they would crash, and I would end up having to restore them. And so before I was Mr. Backup, I was called Crash. They were calling me that. And
I didn't know that. That's funny.
Yeah, so it was right around that time frame. But what happened was it gave me a chance to really like hone my skills and to do not just restores, but bare metal restores, which back then were sort of the cream of the crop, right? Being able to do those, and I got really good at those.
Curtis, you do have your own podcast. You talk a lot about backups, and you want to talk about that for a couple seconds? Because I think our audience would be very interested in that.
Yeah. So the Backup Wrap-Up, basically our goal is to take unappreciated backup admins and turn them into cyber recovery heroes. So just give them all the information that they need, both from a backup perspective, archive, DR, cyber recovery, right? Just sort of a holistic approach to all things protecting, data.
Yeah, I watched one about a month and a half ago. It was about, he said something about the cyber world as now intersecting with the backup world, because everybody takes backups for granted, and that's what's saving everybody's bacon. I think somewhere along those lines. So you want to kind of expound upon that? Because I think we're starting to see this crossover between different disciplines, risk management going into insurance going into technology, all these different disciplines kind of blending in together. And I think cyber and backup are a natural, but they never really talk to each other, I think.
No. In fact, if we go back, years ago, back when I was in the data center, when I had my first backup job, I hated the security people and they hated me. Right, because all they wanted to do, from my perspective, was make my job harder. For the Unix folks, listening, the only way we could get backups done back then was to use RDump, which used the RSH protocol, which was like the most insecure method of inter-system communication. So in order to do backups, I had to be able to RSH as root without a password to any system in the data center, which freaked out the security people. And so So historically, I saw the security people as enemies. So no, we didn't talk to each other, and if we did, it was not a fun conversation. But what we're seeing now is that, and also things have really changed. Back then, in the data center, like we really thought of like the hard, crunchy exterior versus soft, chewy interior, right? The security people, their job was to keep the bad guys out of the data center, because once you got in the data center, kind of all bets were off. Yeah. And we didn't really have people getting in the data center, targeting, using phishing and all that kind of stuff to target specific services. And what we really didn't have was people targeting the backup system. And the problem is that many of the ways that we installed backup systems over the years are horrible from a cyber security standpoint. And the problem with backup, there's no again, I'll date myself. There's no Mighty Mouse of backup that in the data center, here I come to save the day, right? There's no Mighty Mouse.
You just said you weren't going to date yourself.
Sorry. That comes in and basically says, we're going to make sure that the backup systems are redesigned with modern security at the core of that design. It just doesn't, there's nobody that's doing that in most data centers. I would love to come help them do that, but there's nobody that's doing that. And so what you have is you have these backup systems that are they're just so aged. They're just so, they're designed, the software is the same software they bought 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. The hardware is the same stuff they bought 5 years ago. And the design and how it authenticates itself. That's two things: how it authenticates itself with the environment and how you authenticate yourself with it. Those designs are 10 and 15, 20 years old. And as a result, they're super easy to hack. Mm-hmm. We had a red team guy on the podcast, and he talked about how much he loves backup. And because when he's in there making offensive security attacks against a company and they've got a backup system, it's a great resource for him to go in and get the stuff that he needs. And I'm just like, that just kills me. Yeah.
What about lateral movement, things of that nature, when you take the backups, and then will they then kind of migrate and move along with the backups, or is that even a subject?
So what they do is they'll take the backups if they can gain administrative access to the backup, which for the record is often really, really easy. If they can do that, they'll restore the backup system. It's this treasure trove of anything they want. So If they can get administrative access to the backup system, they will restore the stuff that gives them what they want, right? Mm-hmm. So they can use that to get the password file from another host, or they can use it to get the security settings from another host. They can use it to reset the security settings of another host. Like, think about that, right? So I've got a file that determines what ports are open and ports are closed on a system. Well, I can restore that file on this system, edit it to be super, super open, back it up again, and then restore it to the system that I want to hack. So yes, if you've got administrative access to the backup system, you are all powerful within the data center.
So how would you go about rethinking the backup and cybersecurity world coming together? And it sounds like a redesign is necessary, or at least complete update, modernization of some sort. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So basically, the first thing, it's like the 12-step method to the first thing we have to do is accept that our backup system is unmanageable and a giant security risk, right? By the way, I've never done this before. But yeah, that's the first thing we have to do, is acknowledge that. Yeah. I really got to do this. I got to go get the list of the 12 steps, and I got to make the backup version. And then what we have to do is you just have to really say, this is something we've got to solve now. And I really do feel that it should be solved first. It should be the thing you fix before you go and do all the external stuff, before you go and look at the next new SIEM tool or the next new, IDS tool, right? Whatever, right? Is that let's clean up the last line of defense. Let's secure the last line of defense. Yep. Sever it. That's my number one thing, is sever it from the primary. Don't have your backup system administered by Active Directory, right? So if someone hacks Active Directory, that should give them no advantage in the backup system. It should have a completely separate authentication authorization system, right? So there's three things really that everybody should be doing everywhere, but they should do it at the backup system first. One is a good password system. So make that backup system separate, having nothing to do with Active Directory. I got nothing against Active Directory. It's just I don't want one system over everything, right? Mm-hmm. So use a local password management system for the privileged accounts. Number two is patch management. Make sure that your backup system is really up to date, both in terms of its operating system patches as well as its the backup system patches. There was a vulnerability in Veeam that was announced in March, and Veeam fixed it right away. All you had to do was update Veeam. And yet there were all these stories of people that were going out and doing scans and finding tens of thousands of vulnerable Veeam servers out there that were, and they were open to the internet, which is just like, what? Right? So patch management is number 2, and the number 3 is MFA, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So if you've got a good password management system and you're up to date on your patches and you have an MFA on the backup system, you're miles ahead of everybody else, and you'll stop like 95% of the attacks. Then we have to start about hardening the backup system itself. Things like making sure that at least one copy of the data is stored somewhere where nobody can touch it. Nobody can, right? It's truly immutable. And I say that because so many backup vendors use the word immutable when it's like the line from Princess Bride. You keep using that word. I don't think that word means what you think it means, right? Because again, if I can go into the backup, if I'm all powerful. I happen to be the backup admin, and I go into, or someone who has managed to hack into being the backup admin.
Yeah.
If I can go in and reduce the retention of backups to, let's say, 1 day, and then the moment I do that, because there are great things about tape. One of them is if I went and deleted or I expired all the backups, they're still on the tape, right? But with disk-based backups, when you reduce retention down to a day, it goes out and deletes all those backups like immediately. The ones that are older than the day.
Yep.
You shouldn't be able to do that. You should have the immutability feature turned on. And if your product doesn't have the ability to do that at this point, then it's time to look at another product, right? So you got to look at hardening that product. And yes, having at least one copy in something that is truly immutable, like S3 with the object lock feature turned on, so that even you, and this is a really key thing, even you can't delete it if you want to. If that's the way it is, then that's the thing you're looking for, right? If there's like some kind of backdoor to delete it, I would say I hope that backdoor has many, many leaps and hurdles that you have to get over. Things like multi-person authentication, multi-location authentication, not just multi-factor authentication.
Back to the patch management. Just curious, what causes everybody to be so out of sync?
I'll say specifically with regards to the backup system, that many times the backup system is sort of it's the bastard stepchild of the data center. No one's like loving it and taking care of it and making sure that it has the patches that it should. It's up to the backup person to do that. I think that it should be, that the patch management of the backup system should be as important, if not more important. It should be at the front of the line for the cutting edge patches, whatever coming out, right? And the thing is, you're talking about days, but you're talking about, like, you look at Rackspace, the giant Rackspace hack that basically took out an entire business line, right? They decided to go out of the hosted exchange business after this attack. That hack was enabled by a vulnerability that had been patched a couple of months prior. That's inexcusable, right? I know it takes time to apply patches, but when I hear that that people are attacked by vulnerabilities that were fixed months prior, especially if it's several months, that's just inexcusable. You need to fix that part of your infrastructure. Way too many people focus too much on developing the newest cool thing for their tool. It's like, folks, you got to do the plumbing, right? Like I know it sucks. I know the patch management's a pain in the butt. I know backups are a pain in the butt, but you got to do them or nothing works, right? They're the plumbing, right?
Yeah. And now, do you see some organizational changes within enterprises that kind of sort to move things around a bit as it pertains to better cybersecurity and better backup integration?
There are some who are starting to talk about the data protection team reporting up into, we use the term data protection a lot when we're talking about backups. The security world, when they say data protection, they don't mean backups. They mean something completely different.
Right.
So but the backup team essentially reporting into the security team. I think initially I wasn't a big fan of that, but I don't think I have a strong argument against it. It's just historically they've been very different disciplines. And I did an episode where Tom Hollingsworth from Gestalt IT had done this as a podcast that should backup people report to security people. And I initially hated the idea. Now I got to go back and listen to that podcast, see what it was that what had me all up in an uproar. But I think the key, regardless of who reports into who, the two groups need to talk to each other. The security people should have a good feeling that the people in charge of the backup and DR systems have an understanding of the place that they play, the role that they play, and how vulnerable they are from a cyber attack standpoint, and how crucial they are to a proper response to a cyber attack.
Do you think the business continuity the people who write the business continuity plans, they traverse the organizations and to various degrees, but theoretically it should be the entire from end to end? How would that play into this bridging, or does it play into the bridging now, or can it be improved?
Yeah, so when we start talking about BCP plan, I've been at a couple of companies where they were doing a BCP plan, and like they never talked about the backups. They would just say things like, "Oh, and then we restore all the systems." Right? They're focusing on making sure we have a building, make sure we have phone lines, make sure we know where the people are. Right? Yeah. They're focusing on all the things that the backup system doesn't focus on, and then they're like, "Oh, and then we should restore the stuff." Right? And I remember
that's the foundation of the whole thing, right?
If the restores would work, it's just as bad to just focus on the backups and not realize that you also need buildings, you also need phones, you also need electricity and internet and people. So yes, the backup and DR should be part of the BCP plan. And we throw a lot of terms around these days: an incident response plan, a ransomware readiness plan, a BCP plan. And I think that all of these should basically, they all have parts that can be used by the other thing, right? An incident response plan is very similar to a disaster recovery plan. It just has, like, the disaster recovery plan will kind of fit into the incident response plan. And a ransomware response plan fits into an incident response plan. It's one of the incidents that you would have to respond to. Right. And a BCP plan, I think the incident response plan sort of fits into the BCP plan in that, what if you have a multifaceted attack that is both an electronic attack and something that takes out your ability to use your infrastructure, right? Obviously, if it's a terrorist attack, then it's like all of those things, right? But so yes, these are all just things that sort of fit into each other pretty well.
Do you think that cyber attacks are worse than natural disasters in a
way?
Because it's so personal, or what it just feels like you're being attacked personally, or what? Why is that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I say yes. I didn't even wait for you to finish. I was like, yes, because here's a natural disaster, right? Give me one: flood, hurricane, whatever. There's a beginning and there's an end, right? The flood is there, the waters recede. Now we start to do a restore. The hurricane passes over, the hurricane's gone. Now we start to do a restore. Fire happens. I live in Southern California. We're all about the fires over here. It's our 4 seasons: fire, flood, mud, and drought, right? Take your disaster, take even a terrorist attack. The thing happens and it's over, and then you start to restore. With a cyber attack, when is it over? It's like you're over there trying to get water out of your boat with a bucket, and meanwhile somebody on the other side of the boat is pouring water into the boat. That's why cyber attacks are worse.
So with our target audience, we serve the small, mid-sized businesses and other organizations that have limited budgets and limited staffing. Any final words or final suggestions to help kind of get through the day or the next phase before what can you do practically?
From a backup and DR perspective, my favorite way for SMBs is to use some sort of service. Right. I think that rolling your own for an SMB makes less and less sense over the years, that the easiest way to protect your data is to use some kind of service. My favorite would be a fully managed service, right? Where literally they're doing it for you. And of course, remember, trust but verify, right?
Correct.
And basically, this is something that should be done by professionals. And historically, backup has been done by amateurs. It really is. It's where we put the new guy, right? Right. Well, that's how I got my job. My first job in IT was the backup guy. I'd been in the company for like 3 days, and then boom, I'm in charge of backups for a $35 billion organization. How stupid is that, right? So don't do that, right? Put it in, put it in the hands of a professional. There's a couple things there. One of the things is, because it means it's being done by somebody that knows what they're doing, number one. And number two, equally as important, by using a service, you're putting the data somewhere that isn't you, right? You want to create that air gap. It's technically a virtual air gap, but you want to create that air gap between your primary environment and the protection environment. You want the worst to be able to happen to you, and you can at least know that you've got the backup copy or DR copy is safely secured in a completely different system.
Yep. Okay. Well, Curtis, you've been most gracious with your time, and your insights are extremely valuable and much appreciated. So I want to thank you, and thanks for joining us here on SafeHouse.
Anytime.
That's our podcast for today. I'm Jeff Edwards for the SafeHouse Initiative. Thanks for joining us, and remember, be safe, be resilient, and be kind to each other. For more information on the SafeHouse Initiative, please use your mobile device to scan the QR code on the screen. Send us an email at safehouseinitiative.org@gmail.com or visit us on our website, safehouseinitiative.org. We look forward to hearing from you.